Hello, welcome to this channel. My name is Chell Wong, and I'm a freelance composer. And today, actually, a few weeks ago, I actually came onto the show and talked about freelancing, and Jay asked me to talk more about freelancing, but instead of just me saying the exact same stuff again, I decided to ask some of my fabulous friends from all across the different fields of industry who freelance, have experience in freelancing, what kind of advice they have about how to succeed in freelancing during this pandemic era. And so, I suppose, without further ado, let me ask Laura, Johnny, Olivier, and Akash to introduce themselves. I guess in that order.
All right. Hi, I'm Laura Underwater. I am a freelance concept artist currently in Toronto, Canada. I've done a lot of work with board games, card games, tabletop, and currently I am now working with a production company on a video series that is yet to be announced.
Okay. So my name is Jonathan Jennings. I'm a software engineer and game designer. I've just started. I re-entered the freelance market recently. I've been programming games and designing games for about 9 years. And I've worked with Sony, DreamWorks, Coke, a bunch of companies on a bunch of stuff. I specialize in AR and VR right now, and yeah, that's about it.
I'm Olivier Nelson Jr. I'm a freelance narrative director and studio head with my name attached to like over 50 titles. I work a lot and I'm very tired. And I too have freelanced during this pandemic, and most of my professional experience comes from freelancing contracting of various kinds. And one area in which I might be able to help during this thing is I'm now on the other side of the divide, where I'm now hiring freelancers and figuring out from that end what the dynamics are.
Nice. My name is Akash Thakar. I am a sound designer for games. I've been doing this for about 11 years now, purely as a freelancer, and have worked on games like Hyperlight Drifter, Destiny, Concrete Genie, and tons of other stuff. And one of my favorite things to do is to help people with the business side of creating art and making stuff. So I'm happy to be here and chat.
All right. Well, I suppose without further ado, my first question is, how have you found the transition into the digital video conference age? This is now coming on our second year, and though we have vaccines starting to slowly roll out, and really slowly in some places like where I'm from, we're still very much in a digital era. So I guess I will ask Akash first. How have you found the transition to video conference now?
Yeah, so for me, this is me personally, I love it because I'm extreme introvert to like the most ludicrous degree. Like if I take a Myers-Briggs test, Myers-Briggs themselves comes through the screen. It's like, dog, you know what you are. You know you're an I. Like, come on, dog. Like, you don't have to take this test. So I personally love it because it, in a fun way, kind of forces networking and makes it a little easier. For example, when you show up to a conference and it's a room of people just chatting, as opposed to hanging outside the circle, waiting for a chance to laugh at a joke that you recognize, hoping that they'll acknowledge you and let you into the circle and that you can talk to people. They're forced to talk to you. It rules. You're just there staring at them in the face. It whips. So yes, I've personally found it really great. And I found it easier to follow up with people because those groups tend to be a little bit smaller in those kind of breakout sorts of rooms. But that's me personally.
All right, and here I am staring at four other faces. I guess who else? Does anyone else want to go next in particular? Otherwise, I'm going to call on people.
I think that one really interesting aspect about this digital conferencing age is the struggle to make the events feel special. What was once a thing where people would travel, they'd get a hotel, maybe you would share a hotel with people that maybe you didn't know, you just found them on Twitter, you roll the dice there. The dynamics of going to a place to do a thing centralize a lot of industry thought and a lot of industry networking in negative as well as positive ways. Was very easy feeling outside of a lot of circles, but it also meant that if you were present at all, you had a level of access and potential partnership and collaboration set up and freelance opportunities that you would not have otherwise. GDC 2018 is responsible for a not insignificant amount of like the rest of my career. And with that in mind, it's interesting finding that since digital conferencing is the equivalent of, it's in the same tab or browser window though you would use to watch Netflix, there is this struggle now to make that feel as important as something that you went hundreds of miles to participate in and to congregate around with a number of other people. And I'm not sure if there is really a way to counterbalance that outside of stopgaps and wonderful things that indie game business is doing, such as Meet to Match or bespoke solutions, such as the one used for Roguelike Celebration last year, to try to get some amount of that tangibility back.
I think it's also kind of put a huge push on physical health just at home, because I mean, when you're at work, you're on conference all day. You then have to be on the computer working all day. You could be sitting for 8, 9, 10 hours straight. And at least at the office, you'd be standing up, walking around, talking to people, getting even just getting on the subway, trying to get there, going out for lunch, like walking around. It's amazing how much you just need to stop for 10 minutes, get up, walk around the apartment, and come back.
Right.
To riff on that point, there's a similar thing that I found with a lot of freelancers, especially when they're starting out their careers, where this anxiety of how do I fill 8 hours in a day? And the secret is most people working office jobs don't work 8 hours. You're getting up, you're getting a drink, you're going to the bathroom. There's all these little bits and pieces and slices of time which are easy to lose track of, but add up to. Your 8-hour workday was probably around a 5 or 4 hour workday. But when you're stranded at home, it's easy to try to compress your brain space to fill an 8-hour space and thereby achieve a target that you never would have hit in the first place, and burn yourself out that way.
Yeah. And I would say, like, for me, I'm still adjusting to like screens being my dominant way to have social experiences. Like basically all my communication happens through a screen now. But I will say the counterpoint to that is I know for me, I've had way more meetings with people globally this year than I've ever had in my life. So I had a meeting with a man from Brazil just a few hours ago, right? And that's not something I've experienced before this. But I've had so many conversations with so many people globally, and I definitely think that's been I think it's been good. I think it's just the world feels smaller and bigger at the same time.
Oh, totally. I absolutely agree with you on the point, because like everything that I do is in this room, but I've also met most of you online. I actually only have you, but the point is I've met all these people from around the world. So that's one benefit I find to the things going online. And I guess to Xavier's previous point, have you, about working in an office at least, but have any of you ever worked as an employee? And if yes, how does freelancing differ from it? What does one need to do differently to succeed as a freelancer opposed to as an employee?
So I just finished like a full-time role, and definitely I think the big difference between freelancing and full-time roles to me was just you have a lot more. So Nelson makes a really good point about having like lots of empty spots of time you don't really consider. And I would say that kind of in that same, I guess the opposite of that really is that with the contracting work that I've done, it kind of seems like smaller amounts of time to communicate and get points across and understand what the task and the goal is, but maximizing what we do within that time. So maybe we only have 15, 20 minutes, but really making sure that 15, 20 minutes, I get a list of the things I can do for either the next few days or the next week or what have you. So really kind of maximizing what kind of what I learn and what we discuss in that amount of time versus, with at a studio job, we might have an hour-long meeting where we don't talk about much. Like it's a really ineffective meeting, but that's just more typical when you do work in that kind of environment. So
yeah, I resonate with the meetings. Have any of you also worked as employees in companies before? All right. Well, let's move on then. I just figured that this is helpful. I know Akash hasn't, so yeah. Let's see. What kind of preparation do you need to do in order to find work, and how has that preparation changed during COVID?
Ooh, there's a lot to that. Okay, I'll start with one thing, but I'm sure there's trillions of points. One thing to kind of think about just broadly when it comes to finding work, doing work, whatever, as a freelancer is that every freelancer, regardless of what they do or make, is a business. And there's a divide in the thinking with a lot of people of like, oh, I'm really good at whatever thing, therefore the work will come. But a business thinks in systems, which means it's a replicatable process for every single thing that you do. So when you need to do X, you just follow Y steps and you get Z result. So every time Apple needs to make an iPhone, they know exactly what steps they need to do to make that thing. There will be some innovation and messiness along the way, but that's how they think. And when it comes to thinking of clients or getting work or doing something, having some sort of process that we can follow. It doesn't have to be completely perfect of I'm going to send this email to this person, but it can be the sort of thing of, okay, I am going to network in these sorts of circles to get this kind of work with these kinds of people in these realms. And as soon as you start thinking like that more and more, those things become more replicatable. You can find more work reliably. You can think about who your target is, who you're actually wanting to get work from, because it avoids the whole I'll work with anyone, which means no one wants you sort of messiness that tends to happen with a lot of freelancers. And hasn't changed for COVID, honestly, for me personally. It's just been the same sort of goings on. Everything's just slower. That's the main thing that's changed.
I think one of my favorite processes for this was described by Eric Sturp. And I don't know if he discussed this publicly, but it's not under NDA or anything. But he now is a writer at Epic Games on Fortnite. And for a while, he was the most prolific freelance writer I knew. And we were talking around the table at one point. I said, so how does that process work for you? Again, like to a cautious point, because it needs to be a process. It needs to be something that can be replicable and something that you can pursue. And he said, I treated it like a part of my workday, as if I was opening up the newspaper and looking through job listings. I would look at Kickstarters that were being funded. I'd look at new studio Twitters. I would just go down this list of places for an hour or two a day, treat it as part of my business day. And I just send just a quick message of like, hey, if you need a writer, I'm really good. Here's examples of what I've done. And I'd love to chat if you have needs. And his success rate with that kind of knocking on doors approach, cold calling, of course, speaks not to his talent, but also to his foresight in identifying the needs in clients. And I think that is the one part I could speak to as far as going off of his process and then describing my own. A huge piece that can be easy to miss as a freelancer is just identifying where the work is. If you love a certain type of esoteric narrative construction and those jobs don't pop up often, your choice is to either create the situation for yourself and become known as the person who does that, which I've seen pursued successfully, or to broaden to where the work actually might be. And determining, doing the due diligence like a business of research to make your creativity a process that you can follow as a profession is critical.
All right, Laura or Johnny, do you have anything to add on this?
I guess I would just, to the same point, I know whenever I update my resume or figure out how to write new descriptions of like the kind of work I offer and whatnot, I usually look at the job market and kind of see what kind of jobs exist. And then based on that, okay, this is what I do within the space. This is kind of what people are looking for. And then kind of build my sales pitch of myself around what the market's already looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess just to piggyback off of that, considering I'm very much in a visual field compared to like the writing and your guys' fields, it's really tempting to either be super niche or so broad that you can do everything. Right. Which there's an idea you need to do one or the other, but the idea is to kind of take what your strength is and give a little bit of leeway one way, so that you can have a slightly like one style going into another, so that way you can market yourself as, okay, well, this is like where I am and this is what I can do. It's not just one thing, it's these 5 things. Right. And sometimes that means changing a style slightly, sometimes that means going completely, but it really means that you need to be flexible, but not so much that you do not have your own identity.
So I guess speaking about marketing yourself and having this identity, how much time do you spend networking or having an online presence? And has that amount changed during the pandemic?
It has changed a lot for the pandemic, at least for me, because I mean, there's a lot. I think Akash was saying, like, I've had a lot more meetings with people like all over the world now, and like that's been a huge boost to marketing. It's also, I think I spend probably like 2, 3, 4 hours at least every couple of days just going online, checking places out, talking to people. I mean, networking itself, I think, probably takes like 10 hours of my week.
For sure. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I definitely think I was pretty active online even before the pandemic and everything, but I think I'm online over 100% more, right? Like it's just between from like our Friday networking things in the game industry gathering to just occasional like responding to things on Twitter. I've been approached for like mentoring opportunities, and just I've kind of seen people more responsive to the online stuff that I have up there already. Like, so my LinkedIn and my portfolio are probably the two main sources of interest for jobs for me. And I've been approached quite a few times for opportunities just because somebody sees that my profile exists on a website. And so that number's gone up dramatically. And I've had quite a few meetings just to kind of consult on that type of stuff. So yeah, my networking's gone up substantially too.
I'm really happy to hear that you've been like approached for consulting and things and mentorships. That's really exciting to hear, Johnny.
No, thank you. Yeah.
It's funny, my networking has so obviously we all know networking is important. Don't ignore that. It is so important. Make stuff, talk to people. Most people forget the second part of being a freelancer, of talking to people. I hate it. I remember what I said about my the Myers-Briggs test. Like you don't understand. Like the bar fills beyond 100% for introvert. Like my screen cracks. But it has been. I have been talking to people and networking so much more during COVID times than I ever did before. Because like what you're saying before is, those events were so important when they're in person, like GDC or something like that. It was like, there's a thing, so I could be like, okay, I can just build up, I can ramp up, I can like take all my vitamin gummies and then just charge up for this 1 week and then just forget about it for a little bit. But now it's like this constant churn more so than it ever has been before. And I don't actually mind it. I actually kind of like it, but I am on things that, like, my main thing is Instagram. I am on there far more than I ever have been, talking to people I never knew existed and probably never would have seen at a GDC ever, because it's so inaccessible to them because they're so far away. In San Francisco, costs $10 million to stay for an hour. So it is kind of nicer, honestly. I'm seeing people that, like, artists and creatives that I never would have found. And as long as I stay on that, I found that to be very effective. But like you've somewhat met, like Laura was mentioning, it's like 10 hours a week. It's this kind of slow, constant burn of networking as opposed to big kind of sparks throughout my year.
In terms of longevity as a freelancer, I'm finding myself at least thinking about those slow burns a lot more. So maintaining online presence, talking about the things you're doing, and networking is a burn. The big burn that no one tells you about is like admin, taxes, dealing with invoicing. All of those little time chunks to do all of the creative bits, those are a burn. Communicating with your clients so that you can do the work that you get paid for, that's burn. And with all those things burning away, it's very easy to lose track, I find, with our online presence maintenance, how your burn is extending in that direction. Because as you mentioned, if you have 1 week a year, or you've got a couple of events, those are things you can prepare for. Those are things you can those are things you can say, for that week, I'm not going to think about the W-9 or W-8BN that someone still has to give to me, so that the IRS doesn't hunt me down.
Yes.
Now that's just always. So I'm finding myself having to do much more spur of the moment energy juggling to accommodate for it.
Yeah, it's funny because when you mentioned like admin stuff, like all five of us are just like, oh man. I think it's really easy
Has
to.
anyone here done their taxes yet?
Me.
That's a,
Congratulations.
The two Canadians of the group follow the rules.
Yes.
Hey, ours is in a month. But I was gonna say, I think for a lot of people, it's really easy to think about as someone who's freelancing. Like, you feel like you need to be able to produce work all the time, and because you have like more time than other people, because you might not have as many jobs, or like you're not working as regularly. But clearly, admin, managing clients, client tracking, all that stuff takes up a lot of time. Whoa. And of course, networking and having an online presence, it takes up time. So I mean, like, tactically scrolling through Twitter is considered work if you're a freelancer. So
Scroll tactically is the lesson here.
Tactically.
That's good. I like that.
Tactically. And also for online, you all know that I have like 15 hours every week of face-to-face online time with people. I guess, how do you deal with setbacks? I can only imagine that there were so many setbacks during the pandemic where potential things may have fallen through. And how do you deal with that sort of thing?
Grin and bear it, grit your teeth. Oh God, no, it's because I mean, I'm sure all of us have had, things that happened. I mean, of course, all of us were planning to go to Pro GDC, going to places, meeting with people. And part of it is realizing that it's out of your control. Part of it is maybe having to go back and talk to people who you worked with before and say like, hey, I'm in a bit of a bind. Do you have anybody, or do you have any advice for me? Like, it's really trying to work on the connections you have and realizing that you're not in this alone, I guess, is one way to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I tend to investigate very much. I try to investigate what I felt went wrong, and then I try to investigate how I contributed to that, or how I could have intervened, or how I could have addressed it differently. And then just kind of mentally dissecting it, I try to figure out how to consider that situation the next time a similar situation arises, and how I can handle it better that next time. And so, yeah, it's just kind of playing detective work with whatever the setback was, and kind of figure out how I can deal with me so that I can handle it that much better the next time I'm presented with the situation.
Laura hit on something really, really cool, which is, hitting up previous people that you've talked to about hey, you got anything? It can work. It can work surprisingly well. And sometimes it's kind of scary to reach out to someone you haven't talked to in 2 years or something to ask for something. Right. One thing I'd recommend with people who are in that bind, who are I know this person, but I don't want to get I'm in a bind for work, is actually be direct about it. It's really common to see people do this thing on Twitter, Instagram DMs, whatever, just email hey, how you doing? You don't care how they're doing, you want work from them. So what I recommend you do when you're thinking about that is, don't have the false pretense. Write a message that says hey, if you remember, you can give them a reminder if it's been a while. I'd love to see if you need any help with XYZ, and then follow up with the pleasantries after. I love it when people reverse the order of their ask. So it can be oh, hey, I need XYZ. I'm looking for XYZ. Do you know anyone, or do you have anything right now? By the way, it was great getting tea with you at GDC last year. I can't wait to do it again. It's so much more authentic when you're asking people like that, as opposed to how you doing? I'm good. Work, please. That's terrible. Don't do that. Just be direct about it. And for the people who are in the situation where maybe they don't have the network, maybe they don't have that kind of starting point where they already have people that they can talk to from previous eras, that's fine. That's completely normal as a freelancer. It's okay to tweet and ask people about hey, I am doing XYZ. I'm currently looking for work, or asking people who may not be looking for work, or may not be looking to hire you right now. You can simply ask, do you know anyone who is looking for XYZ? That's an okay question to ask. And honestly, sometimes they'll say, oh, me, I'm looking for that. Please come on board. So it's okay to make those asks. I don't think anyone ever gets offended as long as you're polite about it.
Politeness and authenticity are such great points. I'm glad you brought those up. The one other thing I would raise around this is to, if it is at all possible, be a multi-project studio, be a multi-project person. The most stable job will fall through. The dream project will eventually end. Your most stable client will in many cases be yourself. So if at all possible, make sure you have, even if it feels a little bit like a tight wire act, which it is, especially if you're in a country without nationalized healthcare, if you can take on multiple projects at once, just so that you have the safety net for when the bad day occurs or when the good day happens, when you ship, and it's just a matter of what happens next. If there's always a ball rolling, you never have to look for the next ball.
And yeah, just to go off of that, it doesn't have to be a huge ball either. It could be like something really small, like, okay, well, this is only like a 2-month contract, or even like this, I'm working with these guys for 3 weeks. It's still somebody you've worked with and you can create a rapport with. And it's still somebody you can say, oh, well, this is now part of my network. And it's still, like you said, it is still something else that's going to happen if, say, your contract gets canceled. So.
Yeah, this has all been really, really helpful advice. And bouncing off of something that Olivier said about having projects on the side, like I know that there are studios that are like work for hire, and a lot of them are constantly juggling between clients and make a lot of prototypes. Sometimes they work on their own things, but a lot of times they spend time hunting for contracts with larger studios that might need help. And similarly, this can be done on a one-on-one level. People sometimes do skill trading where I'll do something for you if you do something for me. And sometimes it just feels a lot healthier and happier than just kind of scrounging for things. And it feels like you're really helping each other out in an authentic way. And sometimes that might lead to work. So
totally.
The best way to find work as a freelancer, which is heartbreaking, but the best way to find work as a freelancer is to be seen doing work. The freelancers I know who are most often getting jobs or passing on jobs to others are the ones who, quote unquote, don't need the work. And that is because of the dynamics of human beings. We see someone doing something really cool or something that jumps to mind first, or it just comes across our feed and we're like, oh, shiny, want that. Other people want this, so clearly I want this as well. So the more you even establish for the small projects, for the skill trading, a reputation of finishing things, making things happen, and being a person who does things, it puts you in a position to do more things.
Doing things, always be doing things, but maybe not always, but doing things a lot of times can help. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, this is my go-to question. If you could give yourself advice from 2 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
There's gonna be a pandemic. Watch out.
Fair.
So there's this company called GameStop. The stock looks low right now.
It's gonna be fine.
Oh, that's great.
I think in all seriousness, one major thing that jumps to my mind as far as something I would want to tell myself is the drought ends. It is very easy to feel, even after like high points, that like, oh God, it's never going to happen again.
Right.
Often, if anything, especially if your freelance career is maturing and rolling around smoothly, there will always be something else. So if you put yourself in a position to be destroyed or to like jump after the next thing because you're so scared of it falling through, the drought ends. Keep working.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's for me specifically, is chill. I'm very much a very driven and also very ADHD person. I'm like, I'm just gonna do everything, and I just go nuts. But I've noticed an interesting thing, and this is actually kind of thanks to the pandemic, is the difference in results between going all out all the time and then doing not as much all out, but still getting stuff done is negligible. Like the results are pretty much the exact same. In fact, in a lot of cases when I'm chilling, they're better. Yeah. So that is definitely something I would push for people because it's easy. Like we were kind of talking about, to do 24/7 because you're at the office all the time.
Right.
Yeah. I think mine would be, don't be afraid to feel awkward, and don't be afraid to like come up and say, like, just say hello to somebody and introduce yourself. Like, you are gonna feel awkward, and it doesn't matter how old you are or when you do it, you're still gonna feel awkward. But you're still gonna get through it, and you're still gonna be able to say, "Oh, I met this person, and I now have a friend," or now I know not to talk to this person. I don't know.
Right. I guess I would say just I had to learn how to be patient with myself, to kind of piggyback off of Akasha's point, because like you said, I'm used to like delivering at a certain rate, and I get this done, and I get this done. And there's been some days during the pandemic, I wake up and I do not feel like myself, right? And so I had to learn, like, okay, like it's okay if you're not maximum productivity in the morning, that's okay. Give yourself some time, do a little bit of work, like do as much as you can, but don't try to force the issue. Because I think I've had a few nights where I tried to like, okay, I had to get this thing done, and I was a wreck the next day, right? And so just like learning to be patient and kind of working with myself, because it's a hard time, and like it's learning how to deal with a version of me that exists in this hard time, right?
Mm-hmm. One thing I always tell people, it is okay to not be okay. We are in a global pandemic.
Right.
The world is kind of not okay right now, and it is okay to not be okay. And taking the time to take care of yourself, opposed to doing work, and God, as a freelancer, I'm sure you're all very aware of, like, I got to be doing work. It's okay to take the time to making sure that your body and your health and all that stuff is okay. Just a reminder to all of you out there. So one question that I have is partially because I specifically want to find various people from different fields of game development. And so I'm audio, but I'm moderating this panel, so I asked Akash to join. And I know that Laura does art. Johnny, you do coding, right? And Nelson, I know you do a lot of writing and apparently everything under the sun. But I guess, what advice do you have that's maybe specific to your field?
I guess for me, like especially as a programmer, like I met a lot of people who really poo-poo soft skills, but the amount of times a project has avoided catastrophe because I asked one question, right? Like we could have spent weeks going down this road, or I could ask a question now and we actually go down the road we want to go. It's valuable. So communication matters, and even asking the stupidest questions have had tremendous benefit for the project. So just communicate, talk, ask questions. Like,
I can't believe you know someone that's poo-pooed on soft skills. I'm like, what?
Oh,
Yeah.
How
dare.
It's one benefit of freelancers, right? Because like we exist based off of needing to have soft skills, such as looking like a soft marshmallow and saying, "Please hire me. I need to buy firewood." With narrative in particular, the one major thing I would tell narrative designers is it's not your job to save a project. Like this applies to freelancers in general, but like for narrative people and for writers, a lot of your job is to be glue, to hold the project, to bind disparate pieces of project together and present to the player the ideal vision for what this project is supposed to be, in association with the people who have that vision, which is often not you. It's your stakeholders, it's the creative director, it's the development team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? There's going to be projects that are frankly doomed. There's going to be projects that are deeply troubled, or where people don't know what they want. There's going to be projects that, for whatever reason, your ability to put together good words and to have a strong sense of storytelling, even if only for reasons of constraints, right? Budget, time, desire, and buy-in of team, that isn't going to come to pass. You're going to deal with a game that is lesser. And this is part of where the cushioning of having multiple projects comes in. Because you know what? It's a lot harder to feel the deep, desperate heartbreak of what a game could be if once you have the heartbreak portion of your day, you go to the other thing and you say, okay, this isn't the last project. This is not what I will be remembered for eternity. As long as you are doing your due diligence to do the best job you can, and you're invoicing them promptly, everything is going to turn out the way it's going to turn out. You often cannot and are not responsible for saving a project, so don't take that on yourself.
That's fascinating.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I think for audio, I would say, considering for sound and music, it's less visual than a lot of other mediums. Like, Laura can show art on Instagram and people are like, oh my God, it's so good. And I'm always jealous of artists for that. I'm so jealous because you just post a thing on Twitter and everyone's so happy. But like, it's so hard to be like, here's a wave. Like, that's just not
it's
a
so
thing.
much harder.
It's so much harder. So
it's so much easier.
So the thing I'm sure it has its own challenges for sure, but the intangibility of music and sound is kind of a weird thing to be able to share with people because it's one of the mediums that takes place over time. So it's like, hey, listen to this 3-minute song. No one has 3 minutes to like go and listen to like your track when they're just doom scrolling through Twitter. They've got more anxiety to induce on themselves. They have more important things to do. So what I recommend people do who are in the audio space is don't be afraid to think of the way you share whatever it is you're doing, music, sound, voiceover, anything like that, as a performance. Like, for example, I'll post videos of me recording the dumbest, stupid shit I can find. That's fun for people, even though they're not sound people too. Like, I'm not just appealing to sound people. Developers like, you hit a watermelon and you recorded it. I'm like, yes, money, please. Thank you. But it's true. Like, that does appeal to people because there's a bit of a performative aspect to it. Yes, I am actually recording that thing. And yes, that is actually what I do for my job is record watermelons and then ask for money. That is a part of it. But you want to be able to show that off for audio specifically in a really fun way that makes it so it crosses the gap between just audio people understanding it, which is a good thing, and having it so that other people who could potentially hire you understand, like, that's a really neat way you made that track. How fun, you're hired, or I'm at least interested in talking to you. Think of it that way.
I mean, you say this about here's a wave. What about here's a section of a Word doc? By the way, NDA. Welcome.
Here's
even harder.
Redacted.
But yeah, that's a really good point because as a writer, like this partially defined. I love absurdity and turning performance into turning the creation of the thing into performance and something entertaining in itself. Right. But like freelancing was a huge part of aligning my sensibilities to go so hard into that element because as a writer, it's really difficult to be like, here's this lovely plot structure that unifies all these segments of the game. Really important work is going to raise the review score of this game by like 2 points when that proposal goes through and finishes and when the game is done. But there's nothing to take picture of there unless you attach a bunch of logos of the game in like of disparate sections that they allow you to share on the Pepe Sylvia meme from It's Always Sunny. Suddenly, you've got a freelance pitch right there.
You're a genius.
The sell of your content.
You're a genius.
That's brilliant.
Laura, I haven't heard yet from you about, I guess, what advice can you offer for art or maybe specifically concept art?
Yeah, I think the one thing I've kind of learned is that a lot of artists will get into sort of like the bubble of this is what they are influenced by and that is only what they're influenced by. I think my advice is don't just focus on games, go out, like broaden your horizons a lot because like there's so much you can find from history and art from like going out like music or even just like films. There's a lot of ideas that, if you're in games, you only work in games and you only do art that's based in games, which that is so not true. Because I've done work for like weddings, I've done stuff with like things like that, but like all of this stuff can come back and help you out in certain ways. So you need to kind of just be able to be open to the world around you and just take influence from everything. Because if you're stuck just in video games, you are going to hit a dead end sooner rather than later.
Right.
Dang, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's some good advice.
Yeah.
Have an open mind about various avenues and where your road can take you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of you apparently have only done freelancing for about the majority of your career, and that is more or less the majority of my career as well. But I did have a period where I was salaried for some time, and I noticed that there were some differences, and there were definitely some positives and some negatives to both. I guess do you plan on staying as a freelancer? Johnny, I know that you don't do it as much nowadays, but for those of you, I guess if you have any advice to people trying to pivot out of freelancing, what would you tell them?
Why would you ever stop? I can go to the gym at 2 p.m.
Job
on
security
a Tuesday.
is why. Steady pay is why.
Here's the thing: the pay isn't steady.
Right.
We just had a giant layoff at Hard Suit Labs.
Well, that's true.
I mean, yeah, I got laid off.
We shouldn't be laughing at that.
We laugh from deep pain. That's where this comes from.
Right.
So, like, the secret is, like, outside of there being some from some particularities, like health insurance, the job security of a salary job is not an incredible and it's not an incredible guarantee. What it is important is to define is, like, quite simply, like, does freelancing work with your brain? If freelancing doesn't work with your brain, if you don't want to go to the gym at 2, if that is not a particularity of what brings you joy and helps you to work better, then stay in a salary job. And if you're looking to transition out of freelance, one thing that I see being incredibly valuable is utilize your freelance contacts to get that job, because it can feel like cheating to ask for, like, hey, can you submit this resume internally? Can you whatever? You know what? We have a majority, minority, marginalized dev panel, so I'll say this. White people do it all the time. So you take your resume and you take the context you build up through doing your good work, and you start knocking on those doors. Like, hey, do you know someone who's hiring for a salary position? Can you put me, can I skip the recruiter part of this process and find a way to directly contribute to this organization sooner than later? Because you know what? A lot of times the hiring managers of these positions, they want the direct referral. They want the person who's just going to step in and be great, and if anything, already knows people on the team.
Right.
Be that person. Be the answer to their question.
Yeah, no one likes hiring, ever. It's costly, time-consuming, and it takes away employee resources. But so, like you were saying, Olivier, there's like so many times where I see people who start off freelance, get that AAA job that they wanted to because of the freelancing they did, and not despite it or in spite of it. It really works.
Those referrals. Hit up those connections. Networking goes back to networking. But likewise, I guess if you're freelancing and you're trying to stay in freelancing, it's still networking.
Right.
Video games is just networking. That's the only thing we do.
Yes.
Y'all know I network.
We're lucky to be in an industry where that's like, most people are pretty cool and fun and nice. Everyone I talk to who's a film composer, like, even if they're 20, they look like they're 300 years old, because they're like their face is just melting because everyone in film is just so mean. And they are, but like, it's just great. We are very lucky to be in an industry where you could, like, as Olivier can post like Pepe Sylvia memes on Twitter and get work from it, which is the most delicious, just amazing.
I ended up working on Reigns. I as a joke, mainly for my followers, I pitched on Twitter Purple Reigns, which was a biopic of Prince. And then a year later, they DM'd me and said, hey, so we were when you sent that joke pitch to us publicly on Twitter, a whole bit out of it. We were in the middle of planning our Interstellar Rock Band music simulator game. Do you want to be the writer for Reigns Beyond? And I said, yeah. I guess I already got the job.
Nailed it. Yeah.
But You hit on a really cool point right there where it took a year, right? Like you don't know that was going to happen. Sometimes this stuff takes time, but you made the thing, you shared it, however stupid it was, and people are like, "Yeah, okay, you're hired."
Let me turn that off.
I love you, Nelson. You madman.
That's why I also say the drought ends, right? Because it's that you don't know the thing a year ago, the seed that got planted that's going to grow back up.
Right.
And, like, you also don't know what the hell's gonna like plant that seed either. Like it could be a meme, it could be this one piece you did as like a like completely off the cuff. It could be your work from before. So it really is just creating things. Really does post them, put them in places where people can see.
Right, and
put yourself in a position to survive.
Yeah,
long enough to get that next thing. Sorry.
No, and the networking as well, right? Like I've had conversations that's like, oh, I thought I was just saying hi to this person, and then a few months later, it's like, oh, somebody's working on this thing. Would you be interested? And of course, right? But it's just one small conversation that blossoms into like an actual gig or opportunity.
Now, for all of you hearing this, if you think this all doesn't if this all sounds familiar, and you're like, is there anything else? There's no magic bullet. It's just a matter of time and patience and constantly getting your work out there and networking. And if you're doing all that, you're on the right path. And golly, there are some hard droughts. There are some times where you can just not for the life of you find work. And that's okay. That's part of being a freelancer. And so, as just a quick aside, if you find that that's a problem that you have to go through, make sure that you charge for enough that you can last during those droughts. Charge money.
Yes.
Also, you're charging for a lot of your invisible time. It's a time of I'm talking to my clients, I'm invoicing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your rate is not going to be the same as if you were in a salaried position where there's all of these invisible cushions that are not being accounted for.
Right.
All right. Well, sorry. Keep going.
Oh, I'll just say, if you're just starting off freelancing, more than likely you are not charging enough. Just gonna say that.
Very true.
Ask around. You can ask people what they charge. Just if it's $15 an hour, you are not charging enough.
No.
There are people who've been doing this longer than I have, and they don't charge nearly as much as I do. And I'm just like, dang, you're way more famous than me. Ask for more money. Come on, you can do it.
Right.
So ask for more money, please. Just do it. That is all the questions that I personally have. I don't know how much time exactly we have left, but I do know that there are some people who have posted questions in the comments.
Hi, everybody. I'm Indy. How's it going? I'm going to pull up some questions in chat for you since I know you had a bunch of questions. Okay, and it'll pop up on the screen. It's like magic. Here we go. Boop. Look at that. How often do you update your portfolio of work while also making content to keep your presence in social media?
So I'm a big fan of Screenshot Saturday, and like you can't hit every Saturday, but definitely like I try to do at least every other Saturday or so, and just whatever I did that week. And sometimes it's something small. Sometimes I like to do videos, but screenshots work too. It's just like, hey, I'm working on a thing, and then you share it out there, and people like it or whatever, and then you move on to the next Screenshot Saturday. But yeah, I try to do it at least every 2 weeks. But also, I don't like hard and fast rules. I just think that's just kind of the cadence I've learned that works for me.
Who else wants to chime in? How often do you update your portfolio of work, Akash?
So for me, actually, social media and portfolio are the same. I see no difference between the two. So as I post on Instagram, that's part of my portfolio, because honestly, most of the time people will not go to my website, click a thing like, oh, you did this game, cool. They'll just see like, oh, you recorded a balloon, neat. Come on board. Like that's 99% of the time how it goes. They see one quick thing. They've heard that like I'm a charming cherub of a person, and that's enough. So usually that social media and portfolio thing are pretty much the same thing for me. Yeah. So constant.
Well, we would ask Olivier, but he disappeared. So let's ask Chell. What about you?
Oh, geez. I wasn't prepared for this. I mean,
you got to answer some stuff.
I mean, every time I come out with something new, I'm like, I did this thing. Here it is. Social media, post, and I update my website, which is kind of just like a running list of like the works that I've done, and I have a more like finished list of like that is more detailed. But in general, it's just like whenever I finish a thing, And if I have no thing that I'm really working on, I make a thing to work on. Like, here's this EP, aka when I didn't have a job. So
That's awesome. What about you, Laura?
Yeah, I'm just like Shell. The second I have permission, the second I'm allowed to, bam, up on my Twitter, up on my Instagram. It goes up the second I can, just because there's no point in holding off if you've got the work. Like you're not. I don't really know what you'd be waiting for unless there's like exactly like no one's gonna see your stuff unless it's up there. So and unless there's like a event to show off your work as an artist, you gotta just post it. Once it's done, do it.
And to that point, I would prioritize, and this is partially me trying to assuage my own guilt by giving out professional advice. But you also have to prioritize what's the most important portfolios to be updating. So on one hand, you could be, setting up a very fancy, very nice portfolio site. Or you could have a bopping social media that's consistently getting you work. You always have a limited amount of time. So figuring out what is bringing in the most concrete results is a really good avenue of also determining where your time should be going. And this is why my website is all temp text. It says insert first project here, insert second project here.
I hate you. Mr. Boppin' social media blue check mark over here.
That's awesome. And I mean, I've been a 3D animator and I've been a lead animator and stuff. And one thing that's super important is you are only as good as your worst piece of whatever. Right. So if you have like a demo reel or you have a portfolio and you've got like 9 awesome things and then one thing that's kind of meh, everyone's going to think you're meh. So get rid of that thing. Get rid of it. It's better to have a short portfolio or a short reel with awesome stuff than to have like some mediocre stuff and then 1 or 2 awesome things.
I have seen, and also I've been the person in the room for these things. I've rejected freelancers and had seen freelancers get rejected off of that one mediocre piece in their portfolio.
Yeah, and that's it.
And that is one really nice thing about social media, because things are always going by. There's always another thing. It's taken as ephemeral, as opposed to if you put this up on your art station and you think this is great, and it's not great.
Ta-da! Yeah. All right, let's get. What are we looking at for time? Nah, it's only Victoria Tran from Among Us. She can wait. No. All right, I'll do one more question here. How often do you network with people within your craft versus those outside of your craft, and how does your networking approach different dependent on who you're talking to? Let's start with Chow.
Oh, geez.
Come on. You've been asking questions this whole time.
I network with many industry people for like 15 hours across, I would say across a week, but you all know it's in literally one day. Yeah. And for audio people specifically, I find that networking with them, you probably end up talking shop more often. And honestly, I find talking shop just kind of boring. I think that you are more likely to get hired by people outside of the field in audio, but that's not necessarily even the case, even if you're a composer. Recently, I was approached by someone to help out with a score, and I have also been talked to for like someone to like, hey, if we might need to do like, we might want to reach out to you for potentially something. So don't close yourself off to that, but definitely talk to people outside of your industry or outside of your specialty, so that people know who the heck you are in like the greater game dev world. Right. That's my advice, at least.
Right, because even if you're networking within like all of musicians, yes, everyone's friends, but people are also competing with each other. Right. So, but they help each other out, but still competing a little bit. There's still a little competition. I would love to go on, but I guess Victoria Tran is ready. I want to thank you all. This has been an amazing panel. I've been a freelancer for like a lot of years, more than 10. And so, and work from home too. So everything we're all talking about, I can 100% relate to. Everybody that's in here, hang out. We're going to have Victoria Tran from Among Us. Victoria Tran, I'm sorry, from Among Us, the community manager. She's going to be hanging out with us. Thank you all for coming to the Indie Game Business Conference.
Thank you.
The light
Thank
I got, so that
Love you
the
all.
light would be garbage arrived just as the thing was ending.
Jesus, please.
And then
No.
the voice gets like this right at the end. In a
All right.
world. Right?
I love you all.